Welcome back. Well, today we're continuing with the engine. Got the head back from Dave with the valve seats nicely recut. He's actually made a little video of the process of doing this, so he's going to stick that on a memory stick and give it to me, and I'll put that in as one of our videos, so you'll actually see the process of cutting in the valve seats. What we're going to do today is grind these in. Obviously they won't need much, but we'll just get a really good seat, grind them and put the valve springs on, rebuild that. I've also started putting the new sets of pinions on the gearbox. As I said, I think I said, but you know me, I might have forgotten. What we're doing in this one is we're actually putting the wide ratio trials internals in. You can't fit the earlier C15T ones into this. Ignore that, it's some fool calling me. But what are known as the Victor shafts, which is the one that was in the B25, B44, the F model B40s and so on, are all identical. So fortunately the B40 War Department bike, which had the trials gears in, those internals, if you can find them, will fit on these shafts. Now I say when you can find them, the interesting thing here was that first, second and third on the lay shaft, which is what I was changing, and third on the main shaft, there's quite a lot of them about. When I checked on their availability, I thought to myself, great, I can do this in my trials bike and any more I build. But first and second on the main shaft, nobody had them. My supplier in Canada had, I think it was first gear, and that was the only one he had, and then I found another supplier here in the States who had a second gear, and again it was the only one he had. So I'll have to do a lot of searching, maybe Australia, somewhere like that, see if I can find those other couple, and then I'll build a setup for my bike, which would be very nice. So we're going to do that. Now I've already put the new bearings into the cases, and I thought what I wanted to show you, must be important, see he's left me a message. What I wanted to show you was not so much putting the bearings in, but when we drifted the valve guides out of here, I mentioned that we heated it up to make it a bit easier because the aluminium alloy would expand more than the phosphor bronze. But what is an even bigger difference in coefficient of expansion is between an aluminium alloy and steel. So what I've got is an old case, it's actually an old C15 case in the oven. I just want to show you how easily the bearings come out. Now if you had smell-o-vision you could smell this, it's pretty rank because it was an older casing. So if you do this in the oven in the house, you've got to do it when the wife's out and make sure she's going to be out for long enough that you can open the windows and get rid of the smell afterwards. And they come out so easily that if you put them in the oven and heat it up, this little oven here only goes to 450, well I say only, so I have it set at 450. But if you put the case in so that the bearing is sort of pointing down, you will just simply hear clonk, they will fall out. The difference in the expansion ratios between the aluminium and the steel is so great that they'll just simply release the bearing and you don't have to push them out or push them in. So let's pull some gloves on and see if this has been in here long enough. Rubber, very good insulator. I'm not actually going to hold it just in these, I'm going to put my welding gloves on, but every little helps because, as I say, this has come up to 450, so you get a grip of that and you're not going to have much left of your hands. Alright. There it is, just like that. And they go back in, out. Basically, if I could get hold of it, well, just as easily. Back in. So, there we go. Right, let me move the camera a little bit and we'll get on with the head. Got everything ready, got our new valve springs, valve seats and collets. Tool, some grinding paste, and we'll grind one in. I'll only do one because obviously the other one is the same. Now we keep talking about tools. Here's a little tool in a Rush of Blood I bought because I thought it looked interesting when I first came to the States, and it's a valve grinding tool. You've got different sized little rubber cups for the end, and the idea was you stuck it on, and then when you turn this handle, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there must be a little set of gears or something in there, because this thing actually goes so far one way and then it turns and goes the other way, and then which is what you'll see the way we're going to do it. This is one of those tools that I get a feeling the manufacturers made their money from fools like me who looked at it and thought, well, that's clever, let's buy one of those. And then you bring it home and use it once, and then you think, right, and you stick it in a drawer and you never use it again. So that's maybe where Craftsman Sears went out of business. Craftsman tools, by the way, I don't know if we have this at home. I keep talking about tools, and I'm talking about tools again. And I've talked about buying an expensive one. There's a company here called Snap-on. There's a couple of them, Matco, Snap-on, but Snap-on particularly. It's like the designer label of tools. You go in big workshops and they all have Snap-on toolboxes and Snap-on tools, and they cost about 4 or 5 times at least more than the average tool. But the silly thing is, I buy a tool like this from Sears, a Craftsman one, or there's another one at like a big do-it-yourself place that their maker tools is. It may not be quite as good, although to be honest most of them are, but it's got a lifetime guarantee. So even if it only lasts me a year, I take it back and they give me another one. And that's right down to things like if you round the end of a Phillips screwdriver, or even if the chrome comes off, they'll replace them. So in that case, you know, why pay a fortune for something when you can just keep getting them renewed and it'll last you a lifetime anyway. It's like the old, I am wandering on today, it's like the old joke about I've had this brush all my life. It's had 10 new heads and 12 new shafts. So anyway, we're going to do the inlet valve. So let's take the exhaust out. Nice shiny valves. Nice shiny valve seats. I won't go into too much detail on them because, as I say, I've actually got a video coming which will explain it all. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some grinding paste on here, and then we're going to put the valve in, stick that on there, and we're going to press it in and rotate it so a few times one way and then a few times the other way. Well, actually backwards and forwards. And then we're going to pick it up and move it round a little so that we're never actually rubbing it in the same place in the seat all the time. So we rub it, we lift it up off the seat, turn it round a little bit, put it back in, do it again, and we just keep doing that, and that gives us a really even grind all the way around. And then we're going to look at the seat here and there and see if there's a nice, what we'll do is we'll take this shine off it, it'll go like a dull grey, and then you can see if there's any shiny spots it's not seated completely. So we'll go ahead and do this. I showed you that tool. What I have done as well in the past with ones where I couldn't get them recut and they were bad, they needed a lot of grinding, so you're going to be like that, is you can do it with electric drill, but you've got to be careful. And what you do is you don't put your electric drill on the valve stem, you actually put a bit of rubber on, a bit of rubber tube, and then have a little rod in the drill, put the other end of the rubber tube on that. So that almost acts like a clutch. So you can't give it too much, and you just go bzzz, move it around a little bit, bzzz, and just keep doing it backwards and forwards like that. But generally, 99 times out of 100, you can just do it by hand. I'm going to take my glasses off so I can see. There we go. Alright, so we're just going to put a little dab of grinding paste on all the way around. When I'm using my editing suite, I might sort of zoom in on this. Just make sure you've got grinding paste on the valve face all the way around. Then you put it in, bonk. Wipe your finger on your trousers. Your mother would kill you if she saw you doing that. And then you find this. Alright. Don't look, I'm going to spit. Put that on there. and then that's it, backwards and forwards, then lift it off the seat, put it back on. I think we'll use the smaller end. Let's see if it gives us. There we go. Up, move it round. This really is the mechanical equivalent of watching paint dry, isn't it? Now, as I say, we won't need to take much off here. Now, needless to say, when you finish the grinding before you put your valve in, you make absolutely certain that you've cleaned all the grinding paste out. Now then, what I'm going to do now is bring you in and see if I can actually get close enough to show you the little line around this. So hopefully we can bring this in close enough. Now, one thing Dave mentioned to me is that the actual valve to seat contact is very narrow on these. He was surprised, but I don't know, can you see? There, as I turn that, you see the shiny part and then the dull part and the shiny part. Well, what you're looking for is that as you go around, there's a continuous band, same width of the greyness. And I don't really know if you can see it here, but the same there. The very inner band is grey. Maybe if I do that, the light will change on it. And that's the surface that's being ground. So again, you're looking there, you look all the way around, you make sure it's a uniform width and that it's all grey. And that's all there is to that. So what we'll do is we'll clean this one up, and I'll do the other one, and then we'll come back and we'll put the valve in, which is just a reversal of the way we took it out. I just thought I'd show you the exhaust valve as well, because here there's actually a wider seat contact. Again, as I say, I hope you can see it. You can see it better on there. See the grey band is almost the whole of the valve seat, whereas the inlet one, the way they have the valve set, and as I mentioned, this is actually, there are two angles here. There was only a narrow seat once it could be cut. So anyway, let's get on with putting the valve in. We're going to put the inlet valve in. So first thing is a little squirt of oil, because don't forget, when this engine starts up, it's got to run a little while before the oil circulates. Although on that, what I always do, it's nice and easy with the BSA singles, is so leave the spark plug out and I just kick and kick and kick until I get oil coming all the way around. Oh, that's such a good fit now with the oil on. That actually is why I mentioned earlier you clean the valve when you check it in the guide, because the oil does take up a certain little bit of space. Right, so on this side we need to put the valve spring seat on. Then the inner and outer valves go in. So what we'll do first, a little blib of grease to hold the collets while we're putting them in. There we go. Put the end cap on. Then, as I say, this is an exact reversal of taking it out. That in there. Screw it out a bit. Self-centered. And compress the spring. You want it as close to centre as you can, because obviously it makes getting the collets in easier. or the valve keepers to our American viewers. Oh, and by the way, hello to our viewer in Rabigh in Saudi Arabia. I have to admit, it's a relative. Although I don't very often admit that he is a relative, but how are you doing, Richard? He's at a holiday camp in Rabigh. Basically a Japanese holiday camp, I think. Which means I would starve to death because I can't stand Japanese food. When I used to do Japanese ships, I ate more boiled eggs and peas than anybody else. Mind you, I used to eat boiled eggs on other ships because I knew nothing could creep into the egg. Now you can use a magnet to put these in, but the problem with using a magnet is, of course, when you take the magnet away, this collet tends to come with it. So a little pair of pliers, needle nose pliers. Then we just let the pressure off. And there we are. Hopefully you can see with our collets in, everything like that. If I'd remembered to bring it with me, I'd have had a hammer. I always like to give them just one sharp rap just to make sure everything's settled in. So that's how you put the valve in. Nice and tight in its seat here. So I'll put the exhaust in. That's the head finished. And then we'll move on to probably looking at the gearbox. Well, I'll look, see how long it's taken, because I've been blathering on a lot today, so who knows what will fit in. Okay, next step. Slight change of plan. We're going to finish off this video fitting the conrod. I actually discovered that first gear on the main shaft, although it's the right size splines and it's the 17 teeth, which is exactly right, is actually slightly, well, it's a good bit thinner. It's slightly thinner than the teeth on this pinion, but you'll see there's a boss on this one, and the boss goes up against the casing. So if I just put that in like that, although this is a tight press fit on there, I'm worried that it might move. So I've got to get a shim made up for that. So we're going to do this first. Now, the conrods have plain shell bearings, which everybody will tell you, oh, terrible things, and you must do this and you must do that. But don't forget, all your cars have got plain shell bearings. And again, just talking from experience, my trials bike, I don't have an oil filter on, although I know a lot of people like oil filters and they have plain shell bearings. But again, it's a trials bike. The engine gets used differently, and also it holds just over a quarter. So, just over a quart. So what is it? It's a couple of pound to ditch the oil every few hours running. I mean, you could ditch it after every trial, and what would it cost you? Another couple of quid on the price of the trial, which after your fee and your petrol and all the rest of it, it's nothing. So by all means, if you want, put an oil filter on, but if you don't, just simply change your oil nice and regularly. And again, we come back to the fact that my bike's been running very happily for 6 years with a lot of riding. I mean, even when I ride my own sections here, it's not like a trial, because I know the sections. I just tend to go out and ride a whole loop, 20 sections, stop, have a drink, and ride 20 more sections virtually without stopping. So anyway, plain shells, when you buy them, you get 4 because they're the same size as the Triumph 500, and the people who make them tend to sell them for those rather than in pairs. So one thing you'll notice is that the top shell has a hole in it. It's a 1/8 inch hole, and it matches up with a hole in the rod, a little hole that comes out here, and that is some of your splash lubrication for the bottom of the cylinder. So when you buy the shells, of course, they come without a hole in. So the first thing you've got to do is drill your hole. So the way I always do it, see, I've already done it here, is I get the one out, I put a new one next to it, get everything right, and then I use a little engineer's square up against this shell to make sure, and very lightly mark a line on the outside to show where that is, and then you'll find that these are 3/4 of an inch wide, so I just mark it at 3/8. Now what I use to drill the hole is a starting drill from a centre drill from the lathe, because it's a 1/8 inch drill. Drill through from this side, and what I always do is put it on a piece of round aluminium. I also put some tape on, because you've got to be really careful you don't damage this face. Then when you've got your hole drilled, of course, because you're going through from this side, there's a very slight burr here. So what I do is then turn it over, and still using the centre drill, of course, from the lathe, that will, once it's gone through, put a very slight chamfer on it. So that's all ready to go. So what have I done with this? There it is. You'll notice the shells, one corner is sort of just bent out like that. That's to lock it in so they don't move around. But generally you can just put a little screwdriver in there and out they come. They're actually sprung in. So give that a clean out. Then you'll see there's a notch in the cap for our little sticky out bit. So you press that in. And you get that in so the sticky out bit is in the notch. So there's one. Then you take your nice shiny conrod. I don't really think it makes much difference, but I happen to be standing near the polisher, so I thought, what the hell. And you put that one in there. And then if you've done everything right, you should find that your little hole there is by your hole in the shell. Okay. Right. Well, somebody at the door. Let me stop and I'll come back to you. Alright, back again. So, as I mentioned, we're going to put in new big end bolts. Which are, I should mention, otherwise you'll get stuck with them. The heads are eccentric. If you can see that. Boing, boing, boing. So what you've got to do is get the thinner part of the head up against here and the thicker part there. Otherwise, of course, you'll get them all the way in and suddenly find that they won't go the rest of the way. So there you go. One like that. And one like that. There we have nice new nuts also. So we make sure everything is nice and clean. Like so. And of course, where we put it, there it is. These want to be oiled, because again it's something else which, if you just start it up from scratch, is going to be bone dry. Six of one, half dozen another. You could oil these or you can oil that. Now then, you'll see there's a cutout in the flywheels, otherwise it'll go in. So, next thing we've got to do is find our cap and make sure there's, from the factory, the original pop mark there and a pop mark on there, so we know that this has got to go on like that. So we'll put that on. Pop mark, pop mark. Goes in there like that. There, like so. And then we put these on. You'll notice that little mark at the top. It's actually a sort of little pop on it which folds the top thread in, and that forms a little, like a lock nut effect when you get it tightened up. There we have our torque wrench set to 22 pounds. What? Let me just check. No, 22. There's one. Been awkward. There we go. 22. See, it's having this here pop-eye muscle. It's what you need. And there we are. Nice and free. And no play. So, that's ready. We can put that to one side. We've got to put a bearing on it. Then we can put it in the cases and bolt them up. But that's enough for the day, so see you next time. A little addendum. I forgot to mention that what you should do is also put some oil in here. Of course my oil can's run out now, but then you'll find, I can see it there, you'll get oil coming out here. Just a last little check, just pump some through. You've got to have an oil can that puts up really strongly. I've run out because I'd already pumped some through and I thought you might see it, but anyway, it really did happen. And also, I noticed when I looked at the film that you didn't see the amazing pop-eye muscle. Bye.